Hey everybody, Josh for Populi here, and let's talk applying and unapplying payments. That could be a cash payment, an aid payment, a credit, anything that you would use to reduce the owed amount on an invoice. This video is for folks with the financial admin or student billing role, since they can access the financial tab on student profiles and make changes there. One quick thing at the top for financial admins, you can control settings that decide whether or not payments apply to invoices automatically. We go into further depth on that in a later chapter. If you're auto-applying payments, you may not usually have to deal with applying payments, but it's likely to come up at some point. And it's likely that at some point, any financial user will need to know how to unapply payments as well. Also worth mentioning that your financial aid team has control over how aid payments apply, and we cover that in a later chapter here. Let's jog our memories real quick on how recording a payment works to apply money against invoices. On a profile, under the Financial tab, you get an option to record a payment. When you do that, you're creating a record of a payment outside of Populi. So a payment that hasn't been processed through Populi, hasn't gone through whatever vendor you use for online payments. When we enter the amount for the payment here, that starts applying against open invoices in various fields. We can edit the default application of that money and move it to a specific invoice. We can pretty much do whatever we want. Once I save that payment, that money is applied to that invoice. On the financial dashboard, under unpaid invoices, we can see the invoice affected, paid down, reducing the total amount by the amount we applied. Under recent transactions, we can see that payment down here. The point is, when you're recording a payment like this, you're controlling how money gets applied as part of the process. But if you allow students to make online payments in Populi, those payments are made on the student side and then just show up here on their profile. Depending on your setup, those online payments will either attach automatically to invoices or sit here under unapplied payments waiting to be manually applied. If you have the latter situation, that money needs to be applied in order to actually affect invoices. The action of applying payments is easy. On a student's profile here, under Financial, on the dashboard, we have this sill for unapplied payments. If you have payments hanging out here on the right, you'll see the option to apply. Once you choose that, in this top field, you'll automatically have the max amount of the payment that you could apply against invoices. And then below that, you'll see each unpaid invoice and then the money applied there. You can edit the total amount or you can edit the amounts as they're applied on each invoice. Once everything looks like it should, you can save. Then if the invoice is still unpaid after that amount is applied, we'll continue to see it here under unpaid invoices. If it's completely covered by the applied amount, it'll either be hanging out under recent transactions, or if it's an older invoice, you'll have to find it under the History tab. That's applying. And I think that deserves a little schwab. Now let's have a look at unapplying. You may need to unapply payments for any number of reasons. Let's say that a student received an aid payment, part of which is being refunded to them, but all of that aid was applied against open invoices. So you need to unapply that money, free it up, and then refund the credit balance. Whatever the situation, the money is applied against an invoice, and that must not be. On a profile, on the financial dashboard, you'll see recent transactions. You can locate the misapplied payment there, or if it's not so recent, over on the Financial History tab. Once you find the payment, you'll see that over here on the right, you've got a list of invoices to which this payment has been applied. And then above that, you'll see the Unapply Payment button. The payment may be applied to one or more invoices. If the payment's applied to more than one invoice, and maybe there's one invoice against which it should be applied and another against which it should not, you can unselect any invoices to which the money should stay applied. So unselecting here means that we're leaving that invoice alone. The money is applied there and will stay applied when we unapply this other amount. Any payment on an invoice that remains checked will be unapplied when we execute this change. Once you've made your selection, you can save, and bingo, that payment is unapplied. And if you go back to the financial dashboard, you'll see it sitting there under unapplied payments, ready to be applied to a different invoice, refunded, whatever the situation is. Those are the basics of applying and unapplying payments. Now we'll dig deeper into some related subjects in the following chapters. Your financial aid team has the option to apply pending aid to invoices. So as they're setting up disbursements, they'll distribute money to invoices. You don't have any control as a financial admin or student billing role over pending aid. But once that money has been dispersed, it becomes an aid payment. And then you have the ability to unapply those payments from invoices and reapply them elsewhere. Let's look at aid versus non-aid charges. When you click to apply payments, and we'll demonstrate this using this aid payment here, you'll notice that for each invoice, you have line items for expected aid and total non-financial aid charges. Expected aid just lets you know that pending aid has already been applied to this invoice and is covering X number of dollars there. That's money that the payment you're applying doesn't need to pay off. Eventually, that amount will be covered by an aid payment. But non-financial aid charges are a little trickier. You'll notice that I have $450 to apply, and that would usually get tacked on to this earlier invoice. But instead, that amount is skipping that invoice and landing on the next one down. Remember, we're applying aid, and it's possible that certain invoice charges are set up to not allow aid. So if I move that amount from the later invoice up to the invoice that's entirely generated from a fee that doesn't allow aid and then save, it's a no-go. No. That invoice would have to be paid off by a non-aid payment. And that's where knowing how to unapply payments is really useful. You could find a customer payment on this profile that's been applied to an invoice that allows aid, unapply that payment from that invoice, and then apply the aid payment to the aid accepting invoice, and apply the non-aid payment to the non-aid invoice. I know that's tough to follow, but I believe in you. Let's take a look at automatically or manually apply. We mentioned settings that control whether or not Populi will automatically apply payments and credits. Financial admins can find that under Financial at the top, and then over on the right, Settings, and then under the General tab, you'll find a field for Manually Distribute Unapplied Payments and Credits. We default to No here, which means that the payments apply automatically. But if you want to manage payments and credits completely manually, you can set this to Yes, and then up in the right-hand corner here, Save Settings. Also, this is as good a place as any to describe the order in which Populi applies those payments automatically. Invoices have due dates, and Populi looks at invoice due dates and then applies money to invoices with the oldest due dates first. Pretty straightforward. But if you're using payment plans, you'll notice that those generate additional due dates for an invoice. They basically just add due dates to an invoice. So if it looks like money is applying to invoices in an order that you don't expect, have a look at how your payment plan due dates might be affecting that order. Voiding or reversing invoices to which payments are attached orphans those payments. So if you end up on a profile with a bunch of unapplied payments, maybe they've got older dates, you can tell that there's something kind of odd about them, a bunch of unapplied payments just sitting there. Maybe there was an invoice that was voided or reversed, and now these payments just have to be applied to a more recent invoice. Okay, let's look at how applying payments interacts with the student balance. Of course, open invoices and unapplied payments are related to accounting, but if we're talking about double entry accounting and the student's balance, payments applied or unapplied do not affect that. You have a student's balance from their various invoices, and once payments hit their account, they reduce that balance. And that all happens whether or not the payments are connected to any invoices. So on this student's account, we have the open invoice, $2,000, and then the $500 payment not applied. But if we look over on the right, we can see the actual account balance at $1,500. $2,000 less that $500 payment. On the invoice transaction, under details, we can see the back-end accounting side. Invoice transactions debit accounts receivable and credit an income account. If we look at the detail on a payment transaction, we can see that payments debit an asset account, like cash in bank, and then credit accounts receivable. So accounts receivable moves up and down with invoices and payments, but specific invoices and specific payments aren't connected on the ledger side. Guys, we really got into it. A great way to keep up with updates and improvements to Populi as a software is via our weekly release notes. Those go out on Friday and you can follow them in our knowledge base. To do that, when you're logged into Populi, click on Help in the upper right-hand corner, click Search the Knowledge Base, and then click Release Notes and Announcements. Click on the heading for Release Notes, and then click Follow. You'll receive an email when we post release notes there, and that'll keep you on the bleeding edge of Populi features and improvements. And the release notes are fun, it's no burden. I've been Josh for Populi, you've been great, thanks for watching.